Hey guys, it's Clement, and this is going to finally be my review for the second season of Legion. So what this season is essentially about is, as we know, at the end of last season, David was trapped in that spaceship, and he comes back a year later and finds that Summerland is no more. It's completely merged into Division 3. They are now working together with Clark and things like that, and basically the rest of the season, they are trying to stop Farouk, but when David sees a vision of a future Sid who tells him that he actually needs to help Farouk, the rest of the season is them trying to track down his body, but also make sure that he stays out of harm's way and things like that. So, Legion Season 2, I was obviously very hyped for this season. I mean, coming off the heels of Season 1, such a unique and just different kind of show, and the way things started out with that season, and the whole season basically, like, what is actually going on here, was so well handled, and I really did not know where Season 2 was going to go because that. I expected that Season 2 would be a little bit more understandable because now we know more of what's going on and we know the story that they're telling. But other than that, I really did not know where they were going to go with Season 2, and I will say this, while Season 2 isn't nearly as good as Season 1, it is still a damn good season that is very different from anything else on TV right now, and that alone I think is commendable, but we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And just like last season, that is definitely one of the best things about this season overall. Everyone here is at the top of their game. I think some of the performances are even better, especially when it comes to Dan Stevens, who I adored in Season 1, but Season 1 was more of this David that was very confused, someone who just was not in control of his own reality. This David, we get to see more of David Haller on his own, and he does such an incredible job. I love everything that Stevens brings to this role. He gets to explore more facets of this character, and I think he just does such an incredible job here. You are rooting for David, but at the same time, you really do feel sorry for him here. You want him to have this happy life, but at the same time, he's still trying to explore his powers and things like that, and I thought overall, he just did such an incredible job, especially one episode. I thought he was just spectacular in. I loved everything they did with him. The show has utilized Stevens so well, and I have just adored what they have been doing with him up to this point, and I really do love him in this role. And then Rachel Keller, I actually thought had more to do this season. I really liked her in Season 1, but this season we really do explore more of who Sid is, and because of that, Keller has a lot more to work with, and she does some incredible stuff. Especially towards the back half of the season, they do a really great job with that. The Sid and David relationship really does anchor this entire season. Those two really do depend on each other. They care about each other, and I think they did a really great job with that. Keller and Stevens just have such a natural chemistry to them, and that really is explored very well here. And then just like Season 1, Aubrey Plaza is fantastic here once again. However, she's playing a much different type of character here than she did in the second season. I can't really say too much about it, but this is a Lenny who is not necessarily evil. This is a Lenny who is a bit more in control of herself, and I think she had even more to work with this season. I really love what they did with her. I think Plaza just brings such a richness to this role that I really don't see her do with any other role, but it disappoints me because she's so good in this role, and it just makes me wish she would get more demanding roles like this because she is so good here, and definitely that is no exception this season. Someone who absolutely blew me away, though, is Navid Negahban as our main villain here, Amal Farouk, who we have heard about, but this is really the first time we get to see him on his own, and he is fantastic here. Not only is he so menacing and really does steal basically every single scene that he's in, but he's very manipulative and calculated. You can really see where he is coming from. This is someone who is pretty much one step ahead of the game pretty much throughout the entire season, and he does such a great job, particularly in his scenes with Dan Stevens. I mean, those two work so well together, and Negahban took what could have been, I think, a very one-dimensional and over-the-top character and gives him a lot more dimensions, and I really love what he brought to the table here. He was an absolutely fantastic villain, and honestly, at points, does rival Plaza's work in the first season. That's how good he really was here. I thought he brought something to this season that we just did not see before in this show, and I love what he was able to do here. As far as the rest of the cast goes, everyone else does a really great job. Someone who definitely has a lot more to do, though, is Amber Midthunder as Carrie, and also Bill Irwin as Carrie, but it's really the female Carrie that I think sticks out more this season, and she does such an incredible job. I love everything about this character. She's an absolute badass, but they also give her a lot of great comedic stuff, which I'll get more into with the writing, but I thought she did such an incredible job. Her pairing with Bill Irwin, those two just work so well together. Jeremie Harris is still really great here. Jean Smart, for what she has, is really good, but she's really not in this season that much. Again, I'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Jemaine Clement is very good as Oliver, even though Oliver isn't really himself at this point. He is very much being manipulated by Farouk, but he does a really great job, and you constantly are just, you really do feel bad for him, and you want him to be with Melanie, and he does a really great job this season. Hamish Linklater, I thought was really great. Everyone really does do an incredible job here, almost just as good, if not better, than they were in the first season. But now let's get to the directing and the writing here, which is easily still one of the best parts of the show. I mean, Noah Hawley just has such a great vision when it comes to the show, and that definitely is no different here. He does a great job of retaining just the absolute acid trip that this show is, but also the really psychedelic sort of feel of it all. But he also really does lean a lot heavier into the superhero type feel of this season. I mean, this season, compared to season 1, which definitely flirted with it, this season feels like it dives more into the superhero stuff, and I think he did a really great job with that for sure. But the show is very much, this season at least, a character drama, and I thought it was a good choice to do that. You know, it differentiates it from other superhero shows out there. This season is much more character-based, and I really do appreciate that he went there, and I thought his directing was really good. And the writing as well is definitely really great here. Now, I will say this season's plot is not as complex as season 1. It pretty much is just, we have to get Farouk a body, and we have to make sure that we keep him, you know, at bay, so that way he doesn't, you know, try to go rogue or something. Like, we have to be on his tail constantly, and we have to make sure that, you know, he isn't going to go against us, and the writing here as well is still fantastic, as always. But what I really love about this season, like I said, is that it's a lot more character-based. So the central plot is not as complex as season 1. It's very much just, we have to try to get Farouk his own body, and we have to make sure that while he's on the loose, he doesn't do anything too drastic, and that we're always one step ahead of him, which obviously becomes a problem. However, the season is about a lot more than that. It really is about getting more into the secondary characters, and especially when it comes to Sid, who we focus on a lot more this season. It's not like we didn't in season 1, but season 1 was very David-centric, and it's not like this season isn't, but I feel like everyone this season, at least most of the characters, have a lot more to do, and we have more stuff going on with them individually, especially when it comes to Sid, who, like I said, David sees this future version of, and by doing so, we get to expand her character more. We get to see more of what she's gone through, and I mean, this is someone who, remember, has the inability to feel anything. She has not been able to touch anything, and if she does, she knows, you know, what could happen, if she ends up, you know, touching something. And that whole idea is played to a whole bigger degree here. It's really expanded upon a really interesting way that I really did love a lot, and I really love where they ended up going with Sid this season, and her and David's relationship is still such an integral part of the show, and they do such a great job with that for sure. But really, all of Division 3, I mean, we really do get to flesh out at least most of the characters here a lot more. Carrie and Carrie as well. I mean, these two, the reveal in season 1 is still one of my favorite parts of the show, the reveal that they're the same person, but without getting into anything, there's an event that occurs, and it takes these characters in a completely different direction, and I really love where they ended up going with it. It was a really unique thing that they did, and they really did deliver on it quite well, and that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the season, is whenever they cut to these two characters, and I already did love them, but this season I love them even more because they did something really different different and unique with them, and that's something else that I really did appreciate for sure. But the season also really wrestles with the idea of, can you control your own destiny? Is that something that is possible for you to do? Or are you just going to be, or are you just going to become what you're set out to do? And that's especially true for Farouk and David. Constantly throughout the season, Farouk is trying to get David to, channel his inner darkness and go to this more menacing sort of side and to use his full powers on display, which we really do see this season are quite dangerous. I mean, there's literally a scene this season where David is able to turn a gun into a mop. That's how dangerous he really is. He could turn into a weapon at any second. I mean, he really can do whatever he wants, and this season really does expand more into what the full extent of David's powers, and I think they do such a great job with that. But it also pushes David to a place that we just didn't see in Season 1. Season 1 was more him, like I said, regaining his consciousness and trying to, just get a hold on everything. This season, on the other hand, he's really pushed to his limits in a very interesting way, and I think they did a very good job with that here. And I'm going to be honest, a big fear of mine going into this season is, well, we know a good idea of what's going on now, so I was a little bit worried that Season 2 wasn't going to be as weird, they weren't going to dive as heavily into the more bizarre themes, and needless to say, that's definitely not the case. If anything, this season is even weirder than Season 1. They lean even more heavily into the much more complex and just completely just bonkers themes that we saw in Season 1, and it is all the better for it. I really can't think of a Legion that works in a coherent way. That's the best thing about Legion, is that it is so confusing, is that it is so disorienting, and if you take it away, it's just not Legion, and I'm glad that they realize that. I'm glad that they know that they still have to find a way for this show to be weird. They have to find a way for this show to be something really unique, and they definitely do a very good job of that. But it doesn't feel forceful here. It doesn't feel like, oh, Season 1 was this way, so we have to make Season 2 like that. No, it feels weird in a sense that it does work for this show, and I think they did a very good job with that here. But something else I loved about the writing this season is what they decided to do with the character of Lenny, because without spoiling anything, she is not as under Farouk's influence this season. She's a lot more of her own character, and because of that, we really get to see who Lenny actually is when she's not being possessed by Farouk, and I thought that was a really great idea. They take that character to some really great places as well, and I really did like all of the writing there. And this season as well, because of the fact that it does have more episodes, it's able to dive into some things a little bit more. We get a Sid-centric episode, we get more into her backstory, we get an almost entirely Melanie-centric episode, we get more into her, which I thought was really well done, who, speaking of Melanie, is really not in this season that much, but for a while that was a flaw of mine, and I definitely did miss her for sure. But then they give us this great episode with her, and it really does make up for her lack of screen time that she had prior, and I think they did a good job with that for the most part, and I definitely was impressed by what they did, because like I said, there's a lot more time for them to dive into things. There is one direction especially that they take David in that is very shocking, and definitely not at all where you expect them to go, and while a normal show would just, breeze over this season really does dive deep into this specific sort of event that occurs, and they did a really great job with that here. The show also does a really good job this season of incorporating these little vignettes by John Hamm, and while a lesser show, this would feel like the show is being very patronizing, it's trying to spell out things to you. Here, it makes a lot of sense. With a show that is this disorienting, and a lot of the time it's a little unclear as to what's going on, it's a good way of kind of like summing up what the episode is trying to do, but also kind of tie in like a deeper meaning, like what is this all about, like why these keep happening, and John Hamm just does such a great job with these narrations. They're very thought-provoking, and it was one of those things where at first it was jarring, but after a while I was really looking forward to them. I was like, I wonder what the next one's gonna be. I really like the way they handled it, and I thought it actually fit quite organically into the narrative, and I thought they did a good job with it for the most part. However, when talking about Legion, one of the first things that I'm sure people are going to talk about is the visuals, and as they should. I mean, just like Season 1, they are on another level here. Maybe even better than in Season 1, because they take the very psychedelic acid trip feel, and they really turn it up to 11 here, and in all the best ways. I mean, this show, it's just so weird and out there, and it does so many things different from other shows. There are sequences here that you have seen in other shows, but you've never seen it like it is in Legion. Trust me, it is. I really don't know how to describe it. I mean, it's just so out there, and I love every second of it. It's so colorful. The way they play with different visual styles even. I mean, they really do an incredible job with that. They even incorporate this main sort of narration that goes on this season, and there's a different visual style to that as well. And I think all that stuff was just so well done here. I love the way all of that is done. There's just truly nothing like it on TV right now, really. There's nothing like it. And again, a lot of these one-off episodes that they do, they really get to play around with that visual style that the show so well just exceeds at, and I love everything having to do with the cinematography on the show. It is unparalleled. There's truly nothing like it out there. I'm sure there's been shows like it, but at the moment on TV, at least that I can think of, there is nothing that is like Legion right now. Truly nothing. And that's something I adore about the show, is just how willing it is to just do something really different and just go all out in terms of their cinematography. And they do such an incredible job with that for sure. So from the first episode alone, there is a certain sequence that takes place, and you'll just know, all right, yeah, this is just as weird as Season 1, and I appreciate that. I love that the show isn't afraid to get really weird and really different, and just do some things that really make you think. This is a show that I hated the fact that I have to binge it, to be honest with you. I hate the fact that I did that, because there's just so much to soak in with every single episode. It's really a show that lies in the details. It's all about the details. It's all about visual cues and things like that, and they do such a great job with that, just peppering so many things throughout the season that are just so weird, but really do make a lot of sense, and I love the way they end up doing it. I mean, like I said, there are things that normal shows would do, but they don't do it in this way, and I love the way that that was handled. I think it was absolutely genius, and that's one of the things that I just continue to love about this show. And look, for some, that might be very alienating, because still, there are many moments where you'll watch and you'll be like, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I think I really do enjoy it. But for some, that can get alienating because you don't know what's going on. And it's like, why do I want to watch this if I don't entirely have a grasp on the show's reality and what's actually happening? But trust me, stick with it, and I think you will appreciate. Again, if you like Season 1, there's no... I think you'll definitely appreciate this one for sure, because it is just as weird, it is just as different, and I think they did a very good job with that here. So that's definitely one of the best things about the season, just like Season 1. The score here is also fantastic. There's a lot of great... the main score, of course, is really well done, but the soundtrack as well. There's so many great musical cues that really do tie well into this season for sure, and I think they did a great job with that. And then the editing. Look, I will say this right now, the season is not as well paced as Season 1. Definitely it's not, and that's mainly because of the extended episode length. They were supposed to have 10 episodes, and then at the last minute decided that they were going to have you know, an 11th one. I don't really know which one that was exactly, but because of that, the season does feel a lot slower paced, and for some, it can get really boring. But for me personally, this is a show that is just so interesting, and is one of those shows where you're just so glued to the screen that it's hard to get bored, mainly because of how great the visuals are. And when you have these great actors, it's really hard to find yourself uninterested in what's going on, and they do a really great job with that here for sure. And again, that's something I will definitely compliment the show with. But now I do want to get into some negatives for this season because there are a few things that do hold the season back. Like I said, the season is not as good as season 1. And while there are things that I really do love about the season, and while I do think the season does do a good job of expanding a bunch of the secondary characters, some of the characters here, they just don't have a lot to do. Especially when it comes to Melanie, who, like I said, for the most of the season, she just isn't really there a lot. And then they kind of make up for it in the back half, but I still feel she could have had a little bit more to do. Jean Smart is just such a fantastic actress, and this season does not utilize her as well as they could have, but that's nothing compared to the two characters, Clark, Hamish Linklater's character, who he does have some good stuff going on, but just as a character, there just isn't really a lot to him. He's more just there to state exposition and just talk with characters, and there just isn't really a lot to him, but especially when it comes to Patonomy. I mean, Patonomy is such an interesting character, but they really don't do a lot with him this season. Something ends up happening with him very early on, and I just wish that they could have done more with him. I love that character so much. Jeremie Harris does such a great job as him, and they just don't have enough Patonomy. His last scene in this season is in, I believe, the 7th or 8th episode of this season, and he's not there after that, which is quite peculiar, to say the least. He just kind of, like, goes away. You don't really know why. I mean, you do know why, but you don't think that's going to be his last scene this season, but he's gone after that, and it was very unsatisfying. I'm sure we'll see him again in Season 3. I'm sure this is not the last we're seeing of Patonomy, but I was a bit underwhelmed with him, because I love that character, and I wish he had more to do here for sure. Also, while the season never dragged for me, there are some instances where it can get a little slow. It is a bit unclear as to what they are doing with certain things this season. I think that does hurt it a bit. And like I said, as much as I did enjoy the Jon Hamm narration, there are times where it can feel a bit superfluous. It kind of just feels like it's there because, oh, they just needed it to be there. They do a really good job, though, at the end of tying it all together. I'm not going to say how. I will talk about in the spoilers, but they do a good job of tying it up together in the end, and that's something I was overall impressed by. But just for a while, there were some moments where I'm like, what are we really doing here? Like, what's really the point of this? But I did overall enjoy it. Really, my only other big flaw with the season, which isn't really even that big, the stuff between David and Farouk, while I do really enjoy it, it can get very repetitive after a while. It's very much just David talks to Farouk, Farouk talks to him about how he can easily manipulate him, how he wants him to channel darkness and things like that, and David remains steadfast that he is a hero, and it really doesn't get a lot more deeper than that, and I wish they would have. Eventually they do take it to somewhere that's a little bit more interesting, but just for a while it gets very repetitive. Again, the chemistry between those two is so great, and they work so well together that you don't really care, but I'm not going to deny that it can get a little repetitive, and as much as I do like some of the narrations, and I do really like what they did with Jon Hamm, how he incorporates it and things like that, some of them do feel a bit superfluous, and it is something where you're like, why is this really here? But now, with all that out of the way, we are going to get into spoilers, which, I mean, there is so much to talk about this season, so if you have not seen Legion Season 2, please do not watch the rest of this video. Binge it right now. It's on Hulu. Definitely get into that, because Season 3, it actually has started. I am going to watch the premiere of Season 3 later after this review, so definitely look forward to that. But, of course, you know, watch Season 2, and then when you've seen it, come back and watch the rest of this video. But we're just going to get into it. So, there's a lot that really does go down this season. There's a lot that I really could talk about. One of the things I completely left out of my review, though, was the Vermilions. I didn't know how to talk about them without really getting into spoilers. So, of course, you know, the way they arrive, right off the bat, they already are having these accusations. They already are having suspicions about David, or they just do not think they can fully trust him. And of course, that comes back into play later. But I really liked these characters for sure. They started off, and I thought, oh, they're just going to be exposition machines. But as it went on, no, they're actually really important if you think about it. I mean, these guys are here because they have all of this information and because they are wary of David and things like that. And I really like where they end up taking the Vermilions overall. I'll get more into them a little bit later, but I thought they were definitely a very interesting addition for sure. But what I really want to talk about first is everything we find out about Sid, because a lot of people I know are very much done with this character after the Sid-centric episode. And look, I can understand why, but you have to consider the narrative that they're presenting here. This is someone who, like I said, she just can't touch anything. If she touches anything, it's going to be destroyed. She has the inability to do that, and just imagine going throughout your entire life without feeling anything. Everything you do, it's psychological. You cannot touch a wall. I mean, she does not know how any of that feels. And I love the moments in the episode where she's just, like trying on clothes and things like that. Just thinking about how, just picturing how that feels, just getting a sense of how that is. Even just a little taste of how certain tasks are that she cannot do in her life, I think is a really interesting idea, and I really like what they dived into with that character for sure. But the moment that I'm sure everyone's going to talk about is when she does end up raping her mother's boyfriend. Yes, she takes her mother's body, she goes into the shower, and look, I saw this less as her trying to get him in trouble, and more of this is her opportunity. She is 15 years old, she's in a very, she's in a stage where probably she's very sexually curious, she wants to experiment with that stuff more, and, she hasn't really had the opportunity to, and here's a man who admittedly she doesn't really like, because he has made, sexual desires towards her before with the wink and things like that. So definitely it's fairly possible that she was trying to get him in trouble, but I saw it more as her doing it because she had an opportunity and she just wanted to feel. She did not anticipate that her mom was going to wake up and that she was going to get him in trouble. But yeah, it is definitely really fucked up what she did end up doing. And, on the surface, it definitely is fucked up, but when you really consider what Sid's gone through, it makes a lot of sense why she does feel that way, why she did do what she did. And I'm not condoning it in any sense, but I can understand where she was coming from. I can understand what they were trying to do there, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the story they were trying to tell. And that whole episode and the thing that Sid says to David, where she talks about how it's our damage that makes us stronger, and that, love, if we hold on to it for too long, it's going to fall apart if we spend too much time on it. I think it really does underline one of the big themes of this season, and that is, David really coming to terms with his powers and really fully embracing it, which of course we're going to get into, but I really liked what they did with Sid there, and like I said, I can understand if people take issue with where they end up going with her. It's a hard pill to swallow for sure, but for me it made sense. Other things I really did love, of course, I'm getting the stuff with Carrie, and Carrie, though, I thought was absolutely genius. I love the idea that very early on in the season, the two of them, they end up having this occurrence where they are no longer in the same body. They are now separate entities, and especially when it comes to the female Carrie, who basically has to, up to this point, I mean, Carrie's been the one that's calling the shots, while, she is the one that does everything physically. He's the one who does stuff mentally, she does stuff physically, that's why they're pairing in that sense, but now she has to be on her own, and there are certain things she just doesn't know how to do, and the simple tasks like her going to the bathroom on her own, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but they did a really great job with the comedy of it all, and for a while, I thought that they weren't really doing that much with it, but once we had that episode where it was basically all the secondary characters, that really made up for it, because I really liked where they ended up going with her as a character, where she is starting to come more into her own. She's, she is a badass, but she is starting to, realize some things, and I really just love the comedy with those two, and I can't wait to see where they go with them, because at least now, it seems like this is permanent. It does not seem like they're going to be able to get back into the same body. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. It seems like they're going to be separated for a while, and I'm very excited for that. It creates a very interesting dynamic for those two that we didn't really see in season one, and I really do love that here for sure. And then, like I said, with Ptonomy, I really liked where they were going with him. This idea that he had this delusion that was just constantly just nagging at him. It was doing everything it can to just annoy him. And it finally, crawled into his brain. It like rips open alien style. It just wasn't very satisfying. I didn't really feel like Ptonomy played as big as a role this season as he should have. And look, maybe it's because I just loved what we got last season with him constantly being able to access any memory possible and, seeing like the memory of his mother dying from that dishwasher and things like that. I mean, stuff like that was so well done last season, and we just didn't get a lot of it here. So again, I think they can definitely make up for it in season 3 because I don't think Ptonomy's dead. They made it seem like he's dead, but I think the actor's coming back somehow. I can't believe that that's the last we get of him. There's no way. But I just wasn't very satisfied with the way that all played out. Also, the scene in the beginning of the finale, though, where you have David and you have Farouk, and they're battling, but it's not a battle in the traditional sense. It's like a dance sort of fight, and you have David and them singing. I mean, that's something you'd only get in Legion. That goes back to, like, what I said, where there are things you'll see in other shows, but nothing like the way Legion does it, and that's true. I can't think of another show where you'd have a big superhero battle, but they're fighting through singing. I think is a really cool idea, and it could have been really corny, but they handled it so well, and it was honestly really badass to watch, and I hope we get something like that in Season 3, because it was really awesome, and I love the way that whole scene played out. Now, the stuff with Lenny, I thought was so well done. I love this idea that we get to see a more human Lenny, someone who basically gets to make her own choices, which is not something that she's really used to. She doesn't really know how she is human, but of course we find out that she switched bodies with Amy. Allegedly, Amy is dead, but Amy's not actually dead. It's just that Lenny took her body, and that Amy, is now kind of like, she's kind of like, I think she's in the astral plane or something. They didn't really, she's like a spirit of some sort, but she is still very much a presence. We see her haunting Lenny and things like that, which is a very interesting idea. But I really love the episode where we see David grieving over Amy and creating all those realities where, no matter what he does, he can't save Amy. And even though Amy wasn't a huge character in the show, they do a really great job with getting you to feel his pain. And while I do think they could have done a little bit more with it, I am under the impression that Amy is going to be back in some way next season. I don't think that she's going to just stay gone, because we definitely did see hints that, she wants her body back, and I'm interested in seeing really where they end up going with that for sure. And Farouk killing Amy, or at least David thinking he kills Amy, that really fuels this rage inside David. And now that's where we get into the most interesting stuff with this season, is David flirting with the idea of turning dark. We see it multiple times in this season, but we really do get to see it explored to its fullest potential in the last 2 episodes, which we'll just get into it right now. I have heard a lot of people say, how is Sid this gullible? How is Sid going to believe what Melanie is saying? Well, I look at it this way. I think Sid has had these assertions for a while. I do not think the idea of David being evil and him having this darker side to him, I don't think that is news to her. I think this is something that she's thought about. I mean, hell, the Vermillions brought it up like the second that they got there. In the second episode, like I said, that's one of the big things the Vermillions was saying. And every single time a character would bring it up, she would always defend David. She was always by his side, no matter what happened. She believed that he had this goodness in him. However, with Melanie, who is clearly infected by the bugs that Farouk planned. I'll say that right now. I am 90% sure that this Melanie, the reason why she was acting so different is because Farouk has gotten inside of her and completely manipulated her in this way. But basically, she, of course, is trying to convince Sid, David is torturing Oliver to the point of just complete mutilation. I mean, with the drill and things like that. She's never seen David this unhinged before. And on one hand, yes, it's Sid. So you can understand that rage in him. But he also is going way too far, because this is the real Oliver. This is not Farouk inside of Oliver. This is the real Oliver. And once Oliver does tell him of her location, he does stop, obviously. But at that point, Melanie has convinced Sid that David is evil and that David is actually the one that they need to stop, and that Farouk is actually going to help them and he's going to prevent things from going south, which this presents a very interesting narrative. The idea that literally everyone is now turning on David. Now, I will say, do I think some of this is real? Yes. I think David has had this evil brewing up inside of him for a long time now. Like I said, the moment where he is just repeatedly punching Farouk, or the moment with Oliver, for sure. I mean, or even the stuff with the guards in season 1. Like, sure, he was doing that to get rid of, he was doing that because of what they were doing, and he was trying to protect his friends and things like that. But there's always been that rage inside of him. So I don't think that, I don't think that this is completely untrue. I do think that there is a side of David that is going to turn dark, and I definitely think he is going to go there. But the caveat with that is that I do not think that he is capable of raping Sid. I do not think that is possible. What I think is actually going on here is that Farouk is doing whatever he can to create this narrative. He wants people to believe that he is a hero. He wants people to believe that he is someone that, is going to help them, and he is going to be, the person to stop the end of the world, in a sense. Because they, at this point, think David is going to create the end of the world, that he is going to bring about the apocalypse, in a sense, and that he is going to be the one to destroy things for them. And Farouk wants them to believe that. I think that conversation he has with David, where he tells him, no, this is not how it's going to work out, that's not Farouk saying that, David, oh, you fucked up. That's him saying this is all going according to plan. I think this is all seeds that Farouk has planted, and that is especially clear to me when the very end of the episode, and basically everyone is turned against David at this point. David realizes that he's not going to be able to convince him that he's a good person, and you just see Farouk, and he's just sitting there, and you kind of see him taking it all in, kind of like this is what he's created. But going back to that idea of David being evil, like I said, I think he's been flirting with it for a while. Hell, it's something that almost every single conversation, Farouk was trying to get him to feel. He was trying to get him to turn to darkness. He wants to use David in that way. He tells him how I had this love for you since you were a child. He wants to be a surrogate father to him, in a sense, and turn him towards darkness. But obviously David was against that idea. But now that everyone he loves has turned against him, even Sid, he just doesn't see another way out. And I love the scene where he's being interrogated, and he's just asking for one person to just give him that sense, just give him that reassurance that he is a good person, that yes, he has done these things, but he is a good person. And look, some people might say, like, why didn't David just defend himself? If he didn't rape Sid, why didn't he just tell them? Well, I think at this point, David has, had so many encounters with with different sides of themselves and things like that, that I think he's almost convinced himself that he is capable of doing such a thing, and that he has done these things, and that there really is no getting out of this. He has fully turned towards darkness. He is finally embracing his powers. And what does he decide to do? Go with Lenny. And going with Lenny, I think, makes perfect sense, because Lenny is the only other person that has been exposed to the Shadow King. She knows the way the Shadow King works. She knows the way he operates. And these two are doing what they can to get away from him. And now it's everyone else's turn. Everyone else is now being subjected to Farouk's manipulation. And I think that's exactly where the show is headed. Again, do I think that David is becoming a villain? Yes. Yes, I think the way season 3 is going to play out, I don't think David's going to end things happily. I think Sid, we don't know how she loses her arm. I thought it was going to be when Lenny, shot that bullet. I thought it was going to end up piercing through her arm, and I thought that's how Sid was going to lose the arm, but that's not what ended up happening. So we still don't know how that all happens, but there are things that definitely do need to happen. But like I said, I think they have planted the seeds where David's turn towards darkness makes a lot of sense. He has no one on his side at this point. Everyone's abandoned him. Everyone pretty much thinks that he is capable of being this evil person, which I do think he is going to turn towards, but it's mainly because his friends made him that way. Farouk made this monster. I think this was Farouk's plan all along, and you're definitely seeing this here, and that is a fantastic way to get us into the final season. And honestly, I was skeptical of them having one more season. I was like, really? That's all they need? Just one more season? But no, it makes a lot of sense. We've gotten to a point where this feels like we're wrapping this story up. It feels like David is embracing his true power. It feels like he's becoming everything that he's destined to be. He's destined to be a supervillain. He was never meant to be a hero. He was meant to be a villain, and we're definitely seeing that. We're definitely seeing the early stages of that, and I am really loving where that's going for sure. Also, the narration, like I said, there were times in this season where it felt a bit superfluous, but then there's that moment where David is sitting with all the different versions of himself, and he actually is watching it. So you realize what you've been watching is basically David's subconscious. It's ideas that David clearly has been thinking about, these delusions that he's been having, and it makes those narrations feel so much more important, and I'm so glad we got them. Look, I love them as we were watching them, but adding that context just makes it feel that much more important. It makes it feel a lot less superfluous, and I think they did a really great job with tying that together, and that's something the show has just done so well. There are things that they'll plant throughout the season, you don't know where they're going, but they tie it up quite well, and I thought that was definitely one of the most satisfying things about this finale for sure, is what they end up doing with those narrations. Now, moving forward, things I want to see in the second season, in the third season, that, like, if they don't have them, I'll be very unsatisfied. I need more closure with Amy. Look, I know that Amy's still out there. Obviously, David thinks that she's dead, but Lenny knows that she's still out there. We know that she's still out there. I need more stuff with her. I need at least one moment between David and Amy. It just be really satisfying, because I just don't think we really got to have a moment where, sure, we had that whole episode, which was David coping with the fact that Amy is dead and that there is no way for him to save her, which definitely was really sad for sure, but I need a little bit more with that. I need them to feed into the idea of David being lost without Amy, and him, kind of depending on her. I don't know exactly how they're going to do, but I do believe that Amy is going to come back somehow in Season 3, and I just can't think of a Season 3 where that doesn't happen. So I do think we're going to have some moment there. Patanomy needs to come back in some way. I am just not satisfied with the way things are going, and I do not think this is the end of Melanie and Oliver. We know there's a time jump. We know they're in the astral plane right now, but I just don't believe that that's the last we see of them. They're not major characters anymore, definitely not, but I do think we are going to see them again before this series does come to an end for sure. Where's Lenny going to go? That's a big question. What's going to happen with Division 3? Are Carrie and Carrie going to stay separate entities? I mean, there's a lot of places they can go with this third season. I'm very excited to see the way that goes, especially now that Farouk is kind of getting his way. Look, there's a possibility that maybe this isn't Farouk manipulating them. Maybe this is all true, but I just don't believe that. I believe that this is Farouk's plan. I believe that he is pretty much manipulate them all into thinking this, and Sid, who, like I said, has probably thought of this before and has been sort of repressing the idea, now she is starting to buy into it. Now she really feels that David is darkness, especially him suppressing her memories. It's a very good indication that maybe he is that capable. Maybe he did, in fact, rape Sid. Maybe that did, in fact, happen. But I want to believe that Farouk is the one who did all this. But again, we'll really just have to see the way things do play out here. Legion is just one of those shows where you just can't predict. You cannot predict what the hell is going to go on, because I don't think any of us expected the show to go in this rapid of a direction and to really just completely just have a huge 180 in this sense, where our main character is now a villain. I love that idea, but I'm very excited to see where they're going to go with it. There are so many possibilities, and I really hope they just take advantage of it. They have 8 episodes. There's a lot they can do there, and I'm excited to see where they do take that for sure. So overall, Legion 2 is just a really great example of everything we've come to love from the show. The acting is as good as it's ever been. Navid Negahban is such a great addition as Admiral Farouk, such a great villain overall. It does get actually even weirder than Season 1 and experiments with some things. It really does dive into the secondary characters more, Sid and Melanie and the 2 Carries especially, which I really did appreciate. The style, like I said, is just unparalleled. It's so well done here for sure, and it goes into some direction sections, especially towards the end, that really have me questioning where we are going in Season 3, and I'm very excited to see how that does turn out for sure. It's not as good as the first season. It can get a little overlawn at times. Yes, it definitely does have a bit too much going on. There's some characters it seems a bit confused of what to do with, but overall, it's a great example of everything we've come to love from the show. It's just as ambitious as Season 1, and like I said before, I mean, there are shows out there where you can watch and you're like, oh, this is different, but there are shows that are like it. There really is nothing like Legion out there right now, and that alone is commendable. So for all those reasons and more, I am definitely going to give Legion Season 2 overall in A-. But overall, guys, in my review of Legion Season 2, I apologize for this review taking so long. I don't know why it took me so long to binge the show, but I have. Definitely look forward to my next video where I am going to review the season premiere of Legion. Moving forward, I'm going to review every single episode individually. I kind of feel bad that I didn't last season because it's really hard to talk about this show without just getting into everything. So definitely moving forward, the last 8 episodes, I am definitely going to be reviewing individually for sure. Definitely look forward to that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.